One sentence from a stranger changed a lonely cowboy's fate forever, but before that moment, his life was filled with silence, dust, and unanswered nights. He lived alone on a remote ranch where days felt long and evenings felt even longer. Every sunrise reminded him of work, and every sunset reminded him of emptiness. He believed his life would always stay the same, simple and forgotten. When he decided to look for help in his house, his intention was small and practical. He wanted clean rooms, warm food, and a little ease in his daily routine. Nothing more, nothing deeper. But fate was already moving quietly toward his door. The wind carried a story he did not expect, and footsteps approached with purpose, not fear. He had no idea that one voice, one sentence, and one brave woman would break his routine forever. That night, destiny did not knock gently. It arrived ready to change everything he thought he knew about life, loneliness, and love. The cowboy lived alone on a quiet ranch far from the town, where silence followed him like a shadow that never left. Every morning he woke before sunrise, not because he wanted to, but because loneliness gave him no reason to sleep longer. His days were filled with hard work, fixing fences, tending animals, and staring at endless land that echoed his empty life. No laughter lived in his house, no voice called his name, and no warmth waited for him at night. Memories of the past were his only companions, and they often hurt more than they healed. He had learned to survive without comfort, but surviving was not the same as living. As time passed, the weight inside his chest grew heavier than the physical labor he performed every day. He never spoke about it, yet his heart quietly wished for change. He did not know that his lonely routine was about to break, and that fate was already preparing something unexpected for him. The quiet routine that once felt normal now pressed against him with unfamiliar weight, and as another empty evening settled over the ranch, the cowboy finally admitted a truth he had avoided for years. He could no longer manage everything alone. His hands were strong, but even strength has limits, and the silence inside his house had begun to feel heavier than the work outside. Dust gathered in corners he no longer noticed. Meals became simpler and colder, and nights stretched longer with nothing but thoughts to keep him awake. He was not searching for companionship or comfort, only relief from the endless cycle that drained him day by day. The idea came quietly, without drama, a practical solution to a practical problem. A maid, he thought, someone to help with cooking, cleaning, and small tasks that would bring order back into his home. It felt reasonable, safe, and controlled, a decision without emotional risk. He imagined short conversations, clear rules, and a routine that would stay unchanged except for the help he needed. There was no hope attached to the thought, no dream hidden inside it, only the desire for peace and balance. As he planned where the person would sleep and how much he could offer, he believed this choice would remain small, almost forgettable. He did not sense the shift already happening within him, the subtle crack forming in the walls he had built around his life. The ranch stood still under the fading light, as if holding its breath, waiting for something unseen to arrive. He posted word in town with little expectation and returned home certain that nothing meaningful would come of it. In his mind, this was only about survival, about making life easier, not fuller. Yet fate does not announce itself when it changes direction, and the moment he made that decision, his path quietly turned. The house that had known only silence prepared itself for a voice it had never heard, and the door he locked every night stood unaware of the truth that would soon stand before it. He went to sleep believing he had solved a simple problem, unaware that his careful plan was about to unravel in the most unexpected way, and that the help he sought would arrive carrying a meaning far deeper than chores, far heavier than routine, and powerful enough to rewrite the life he thought was already decided. Night settled gently over the ranch as the air cooled and the sky darkened, and just as the cowboy finished securing the doors, a soft but steady presence appeared at the edge of the porch, not announced by noise, but by certainty. He opened the door expecting nothing more than the wind, yet found an Apache woman standing before him, her posture straight, her eyes calm, and her silence carrying weight. She did not look lost, frightened, or unsure, and the lantern light revealed a strength shaped by long roads and hard choices. The moment stretched as neither spoke, and in that pause, the cowboy sensed that this meeting was not accidental. Without hesitation, She met his gaze and spoke words that cut through his expectations with quiet power, saying she had come to be his wife. The sentence landed heavier than thunder, leaving him frozen between disbelief and curiosity. He searched her face for doubt, but found only resolve and dignity, as if the path that led her here had been chosen with care. Questions crowded his mind, yet none reached his lips as he struggled to understand why she stood there and what courage had carried her to this door. The ranch, once defined by emptiness, now felt charged with possibility and tension, and the silence he knew so well shifted into something unfamiliar. He stepped back to let her inside, not from agreement but from instinct, sensing that turning her away would close a door he might never see again. As she crossed the threshold, the house seemed to awaken, walls absorbing a presence they had never known. She did not rush to explain, nor did she plead for acceptance, and that restraint unsettled him more than desperation ever could. Her calm suggested a story shaped by loss and survival, one that did not ask for pity but offered truth. The cowboy felt the ground beneath his certainty begin to move, and the simple plan he had formed unraveled in his thoughts. He realized that whatever brought her here was bound to change him, whether he accepted it or not. Outside, the wind softened, and inside, the distance he carried for years began to thin. He understood that the life he had guarded so carefully was now exposed to a choice that demanded more than logic. In that quiet room, with a stranger who spoke as if fate had already decided, the future waited without answers, and the cowboy stood at the edge of a moment that would define everything that followed. The words she spoke echoed inside the room long after her voice fell silent, and the cowboy stood still as if time itself had paused, his mind struggling to catch up with a moment he never imagined facing. His breath felt shallow, not from fear but from confusion that tightened his chest, because nothing in his careful planning had prepared him for this truth spoken so calmly. He studied her face again, searching for uncertainty or desperation, yet found neither, only a quiet strength that made the moment even heavier. Her statement was simple, but the meaning behind it felt layered, carrying pain shaped by loss, courage earned through survival, and purpose that refused to bend. He wanted to speak, to ask why, to demand reason, but his voice would not rise, trapped by the weight of what stood before him. The house seemed smaller now, filled with tension and possibility, and the silence between them grew thick with unspoken questions. He felt unsteady, as if the ground beneath his life had shifted without warning, forcing him to face emotions he had buried beneath years of routine. Her presence challenged everything he believed about control, about choice, about the future he thought was already written. He realized that this was not a misunderstanding or a careless statement, but a decision she had carried across distance and hardship to reach this very door. The calm in her eyes told him she expected nothing to be easy, and that truth unsettled him more than anger or fear ever could. His thoughts raced toward responsibility, consequence, and the unknown, each one colliding with the loneliness he had tried to accept as permanent. For the first time in years, he felt exposed, seen in a way that stripped away the armor he wore in isolation. He wondered what kind of life could drive someone to arrive with such certainty, and what kind of man he was expected to be in response. The air felt heavy with meaning, and every second that passed deepened the tension rather than easing it. He sensed that whatever he said next would not only affect her future, but reshape his own in ways he could not yet understand. Standing there, caught between reason and instinct, he felt the pull of two paths forming before him, one leading back to the safety of solitude, the other toward a future filled with risk and connection. Her words had opened a door inside him that he had kept locked for too long, and even in his confusion, he knew there was no returning to who he was moments before. She finally spoke again, not with urgency but with honesty, and her voice carried the weight of roads walked alone and nights survived without protection, explaining a past shaped by loss rather than bitterness. She shared how her people were scattered, how safety vanished piece by piece, and how survival demanded strength she never asked for but learned to carry. Each word revealed endurance instead of sorrow, and the cowboy listened without interruption, sensing that these were not rehearsed lines but truths earned through hardship. She did not describe herself as helpless, nor did she ask for rescue, making it clear that she had reached this place by choice, not desperation. What she offered was loyalty built on respect, partnership grounded in shared responsibility, and a future shaped by trust rather than convenience. As she spoke, her eyes remained steady, showing no shame in her journey and no fear of judgment, and that quiet confidence stirred something unfamiliar within him. He felt the walls around his heart soften, not from sympathy, but from admiration, because strength presented without demand carries its own power. Her story filled the room with meaning, and the silence that followed felt different from before, no longer heavy but thoughtful. He realized that her arrival was not an escape for her, but a deliberate step towards something lasting, and that understanding unsettled him more than her original words. The guarded part of him that once resisted closeness now faced a truth he could not deny. That connection does not always arrive gently. Sometimes it arrives with courage and certainty. He saw that she was offering more than companionship. She was offering shared purpose, and that offer carried responsibility he had never planned to accept. As her voice faded, he felt a slow shift inside, a recognition that his loneliness had never been strength but avoidance. The ranch that once symbolized isolation now felt like ground where something new could grow, if he allowed it. He did not respond immediately, but his silence was no longer confusion. It was reflection shaped by respect. In that moment, he understood that her strength did not weaken him. It challenged him to become more than he had allowed himself to be. The guarded heart he protected for years responded quietly, not with certainty, but with openness. And for the first time since solitude claimed him, he felt the presence of another life beside his own, not as a burden, but as possibility waiting to be chosen. The room held its breath as his thoughts turned inward, pulled between caution learned through years of solitude and the compassion awakened by her honesty, and the conflict pressed against him with quiet force. Fear warned him of risk, of change, of responsibility that could disturb the fragile balance he had built to survive, reminding him how easy it was to remain alone and untouched. Compassion answered differently, urging him to consider the courage it took for her to stand there with dignity and truth, offering partnership without demand or weakness. He paced slowly, feeling the weight of choice settle into his steps, understanding that refusal would return him to familiarity while acceptance would lead him into the unknown. His mind searched for certainty, yet none appeared, only a growing awareness that some decisions are meant to be felt rather than solved. He looked at her again and sensed patience instead of pressure, as if she understood that trust cannot be rushed and must be earned through reflection. That calm allowed him space to confront his own guarded nature, shaped by years of avoiding attachment to protect himself from loss. Memories of empty nights and silent meals surfaced, no longer dull but sharp, revealing how deeply loneliness had shaped his days. For the first time, he questioned whether isolation had truly been strength or simply fear disguised as control. Hope stirred quietly, unfamiliar and fragile, yet persistent enough to demand attention. He imagined mornings filled with shared purpose instead of routine, evenings marked by conversation rather than echoes, and the possibility unsettled him while drawing him closer. The struggle intensified as he recognized that compassion did not require certainty, only willingness to listen and grow. He realized that turning away would be easier, but ease had never brought fulfillment, only endurance. Standing there, he understood that this moment was asking him to choose not between right and wrong, but between safety and meaning. His breath steadied as resolve began to form, not as a promise, but as openness to try, to risk, to step beyond what he knew. The fear did not vanish, yet it no longer controlled him, softened by the understanding that hope often arrives disguised as challenge. He sensed that whatever choice he made would shape the man he became next, and that awareness grounded him. In the quiet tension of that space, with the future unwritten and present before him, he felt something he had not felt in years, a gentle rise of hope that did not guarantee happiness but offered direction. And for the first time since solitude defined his life, he allowed himself to believe that choosing compassion could lead him toward a purpose he never thought possible. The choice settled quietly between them, not spoken as a promise but felt as truth. And in that moment, everything changed without noise or celebration. The cowboy chose understanding over fear, and that single decision opened a future he never believed was meant for him. The ranch no longer felt empty, because two lives now shared its silence and its purpose. The Apache woman did not take his loneliness away. She transformed it into strength, and he did not save her. He stood beside her. What began as a simple search for help became a bond built on respect, trust, and shared courage. Days slowly filled with meaning, not perfection, but partnership. Their past pains did not disappear, yet they no longer carried them alone. The door that once closed each night on solitude now opened to belonging. Destiny had arrived unannounced, and when it was welcomed, it rewrote both their lives forever, leaving behind a truth that love often begins where expectations end.